Stepchildren told me they didn't have to respect me if they didn't want to. So I stopped paying for their lives. So I gave them a house without me and without the money that kept it running. When the bills came due and their mother couldn't cover it, they begged me to come back. I showed them the spreadsheet of what I'd been paying for a decade and said no. The house was sold 3 months later. They thought money just appeared. They learned otherwise. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reddit Visuals. I'm James. I'm 47. And this is the story of how I spent 11 years being told I wasn't family while funding an entire household, and how one sentence from my stepson finally made me stop. My wife Rachel says I should have walked away years earlier. She's probably right. I met my ex-wife Laura when I was 36. She was 34, divorced, with 2 kids from her first marriage. Jake was 11, and Lily was 9. Their biological father, Mark, was the classic every other weekend dad. He'd show up with video games and pizza, take them to the movies, post photos on Facebook about being a devoted father, then disappear when it was time for parent-teacher conferences or emergency room visits. I grew up without a father, so when Laura and I got serious, I made myself a promise. If I were going to be in these kids' lives, I was going all in. No half measures. No disappearing when things got hard. We dated for about a year and a half before we got married. Small ceremony, nothing fancy, just us and the kids and a few close friends. I moved into Laura's rental house, a cramped 3-bedroom place where the kids shared a room and we could hear every argument through the walls. We made it work for about 8 months before I started looking at options. Laura had terrible credit from her divorce, couldn't qualify for a mortgage on her income alone, and I could see the strain it was putting on everyone. The kids were getting older, they needed space, and I wanted to give them stability. So I bought a house. 4 bedrooms, good school district, big backyard, the whole package. I qualified for the mortgage on my income, put down 20% from my savings, and the deed went in my name only because Laura's credit wouldn't allow her to be on it. That was the deal we made, and I was fine with it. From day one, I never called it my house. It was always our house, our home. I painted Lily's room the exact shade of purple she wanted. I built Jake a custom gaming setup with a desk I spent 3 weekends constructing. I installed a basketball hoop in the driveway and spent hours teaching Jake to shoot. I planted a garden for Laura because she'd always wanted one. I was there for everything. Every school event, every doctor's appointment, every late night in the emergency room. When Lily broke her wrist, I was the one sitting with her for 4 hours waiting for x-rays while Laura was at work, and Mark was unreachable. When Jake's science project was due and he'd procrastinated, I was the one staying up until 2 a.m. helping him build a model solar system. I drove carpool, I packed lunches, and I signed permission slips. Mark would show up twice a month, take them for pizza, and get comments on social media about what an amazing dad he was. I told myself I didn't care about credit as long as the kids were okay. For a while, it felt real. We had movie nights and inside jokes and Sunday morning pancakes. The kids started calling me Jay, this casual nickname that felt like acceptance. I didn't need to be dad. I just wanted to matter. But things started shifting when Jake hit high school. Suddenly, every rule I set was controlling. Every request was met with eye rolls. When I'd tell him to be home by midnight, he'd say Derek's dad lets him stay out until 2. When I'd ask him to help with yard work, he'd complain that Mark never made him do chores. The worst part wasn't the pushback. It was Laura's response. The first time Lily said, "You're not my real dad. You can't tell me what to do." I waited for Laura to back me up. She just shrugged and said I should pick my battles, that it was normal teenage stuff. So I adjusted. I tried being the calm parent who explained instead of commanded. Sometimes it worked, mostly it didn't. Meanwhile, Mark got more involved, or at least more vocal. He'd text the kids about how strict I was, how he'd never make them do chores or follow curfews. I'd see messages on their phones. "Jay's freaking out about dishes again, lol. You can always move in with me when you turn 18. I'd never hassle you like that." He loved positioning himself as the fun dad and me as the uptight stepdad who ruined everything. Years passed like this. Jake turned 21. Lily turned 19. Both are still living at home, rent-free. Jake worked part-time at Best Buy and spent the rest of his time gaming. Lily was taking a gap year to figure things out, which mostly meant sleeping until noon and going out with friends at night. I tried to set reasonable expectations. not even demanding ones. I sat them both down and said, "Look, you're adults now. I'm happy to have you here while you get on your feet, but I need you contributing to the household. Basic chores. And once you're working more hours, $200 a month to help with bills. That's it. Not even close to what rent would cost anywhere else." Jake looked at me like I'd suggested he donate a kidney. "That's insane. Mom doesn't charge us rent. Why should you?" Lily jumped in. "You make good money. Why are you nickel and dimming your own family?" Family. That word always came up when they wanted something. I tried talking to Laura about it. Told her I was burning out, that I felt like an ATM in my own house. She did that thing where she rubbed her temples and said she was stuck in the middle, that they were her kids and she couldn't just push them out. I said they're adults, not kids, and I'm not asking you to push them out. I'm asking for basic respect and contribution. We went in circles. Nothing changed. Then came the night everything broke. It was a Tuesday, and I'd had a brutal day at work. A deal I'd been working on for 3 months fell through. My boss was on my case about numbers, and I was exhausted. I came home to find the house looking like a disaster zone. Pizza boxes on the floor, dishes piled in the sink, the dishwasher completely empty, trash overflowing. Nobody else was home. I took a breath and started cleaning because that's what I always did. About 20 minutes later, the front door burst open, and Jake and Lily came in with 2 of their friends, music blasting from someone's phone, everyone laughing. They didn't even see me at first. I heard Lily say to her friend, "God, I can't believe we ended up at Mark's yesterday. He's so much more chill than living here." I cleared my throat. "Hey, whose turn was it to do dishes?" The room went quiet. Lily rolled her eyes. "Can you not do this in front of people?" I said, "Can you not treat the house like a dumpster?" We argued for a few minutes. The usual script, nothing new. Then Jake stepped forward. He was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, his friends watching, and he said, "You know what, Jay? We don't have to respect you if we don't want to. You're not our real dad. You're just some guy Mom married who pays the bills." The room went completely silent. He said it with this smirk, like he'd been saving that line. It was a gotcha moment. Lily didn't say anything, but she didn't disagree either. One of their friends actually laughed. I remember putting down the dish very carefully so I wouldn't break it, drying my hands on a towel and just looking at him. "You're absolutely right," I said. "You don't have to respect me. I can't force that, and I can't force myself to keep funding people who see me as just some guy who pays the bills." He blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree. "So what? You're going to have a meltdown?" I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because something in me just let go. All those years of bending over backwards, convincing myself that any scrap of appreciation was enough, just snapped. "No," I said. "I'm going to stop." Then I walked upstairs to my office, closed the door, and opened a file on my computer. I'd been paying for everything for so long I'd never actually added it up. The mortgage was $2,400 a month. Property taxes are another $450 monthly. Utilities average $320. Internet and streaming services, $180. Groceries for 5 people, around $800. Car insurance for vehicles I'd helped buy, $240. I wasn't even counting maintenance, repairs, the new roof I'd put on 2 years ago, the HVAC system I'd replaced. I was looking at close to $4,500 a month, every month, for 11 years. Over $500,000, and I'd just been told I was just some guy who pays the bills. The next morning I called a family law attorney. I laid everything out. The house was in my name only, purchased during the marriage, but with my sole income and credit. In our state, that made it marital property subject to division, but I had options. We could sell it and split the proceeds, or I could buy out her share, or she could buy out mine. What I really wanted, I told the attorney, was out. Out of the marriage, out of the dynamic, out of the role I'd been playing. He asked what my goal was. I said I want them to understand that the life they've been living doesn't just happen. I want them to see what their house actually costs when there's nobody quietly covering everything. We worked out a separation agreement over the next few weeks. I didn't try to take the house. I offered Laura a deal. She could buy out my equity share over time, keep the house, and I'd sign it over to her name completely. In exchange, I'd keep my retirement accounts and we'd split everything else fairly. The catch was simple. Once my name came off that house, I was done paying for it. No more mortgage payments from me. No more utilities. No more being the safety net. She'd have the house free and clear of me, but she'd also have all the bills that came with it. The agreement was fair, maybe even generous, given what I'd put into the place. My attorney said any judge would approve it. Laura didn't sign right away. We had several tense conversations. She kept saying the kids didn't mean it, that they were just being young and stupid, that we could fix this. I told her they're not young, they're adults, and they meant every word. They just didn't think it would cost them anything. She tried the "we can go to counseling" route. I told her I'd been in counseling alone for 2 years, trying to figure out why I felt like a ghost in my own home, and I was done. Finally, when she realized I wasn't bluffing, she sighed. The house became hers. I agreed to pay spousal support for 3 years as part of the settlement, which was fair. But that was it. Everything else was on her. The day the papers were finalized, I heard Lily shout from downstairs, "Finally! It's Mom's house now, not his." I was in my office packing boxes. That moment crystallized everything. They wanted the house. They just didn't want the mortgage that came with it. I spent the next week moving into a 2-bedroom condo I'd rented across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Clean, quiet. I took my personal belongings, my tools, and the furniture I'd owned before the marriage. I left the big TV, the couch they loved, the kitchen table, and the beds. I wasn't trying to be vindictive, but I did leave something on that kitchen table before I locked the door for the last time. A folder. Inside was every bill for the house. The mortgage statement shows $2,400 due monthly. The electric bill averages $180. Gas, $90. Water, $50. Internet, $110. Property tax statement showing the annual cost, and a printed spreadsheet I'd made showing every major expense I'd covered over 11 years. The new roof, the HVAC, the appliances, the repairs. At the bottom, I'd written a total, $563,000, more than $500,000. On top of the folder, I left a note on a sticky pad. You don't have to respect me. You never did. But you do have to respect the math. This is what it actually costs to run this house. Good luck. Then I drove to my new place. That first night, I sat on my couch eating Chinese takeout, surrounded by boxes, and the silence was incredible. No stomping feet, no doors slamming. No, being called just some guy, in my own living room. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I called my bank. I'd been depositing my entire paycheck into our joint account for over a decade. I opened a new individual account, transferred my direct deposit, and moved my savings out. I called every utility company and removed my card from automatic payment. I didn't shut anything off. That would have been illegal since her name was on the accounts too, but I transferred primary responsibility to her. I called the mortgage company and confirmed that with the house now solely in her name per our divorce agreement, I was no longer responsible for payments. Within a week, Laura started calling. "The mortgage payment is due tomorrow, and I don't have enough to cover it." I stayed calm. "The house is yours now, Laura. This is what you and the kids wanted." She tried a different angle. "I didn't realize the property taxes were this high." I said, "They're the same as they've been for 11 years. You just never had to think about it before." She called again 3 days later. "The electric company is threatening to shut off service if I don't pay the past due amount by Friday." I asked how much. She said $540. I didn't ask how she'd racked up 3 months of unpaid bills in 3 weeks. I just said, "I'm paying spousal support as ordered by the court. That's my legal obligation. The house bills are yours now." Jake called me around week 2, angry. "This is messed up, man. You know Mom can't afford all this. You're punishing us for one comment." I asked him if he remembered what he said. He got defensive. I was angry. "I didn't mean we should lose our house over it," I said very calmly. "Jake, you told me I'm just some guy who pays bills, so I stopped being that guy. You got what you asked for, a house without me in it. The bills are the price of that choice." He said I was abandoning my family. I said, "You made it clear I was never really family. You can't tell someone they're nothing and still expect them to fund your entire life. That's not how it works." He hung up on me. The calls and texts continued for weeks. Laura tried guilt. The kids tried anger. At one point, Mark, the biological father, actually called me. We'd never spoken one-on-one in 11 years. "Hey, Jay, it's Mark," he said, trying to sound friendly. "Look, Laura says you left and the kids are struggling. They're used to a certain lifestyle, you know. You really gonna leave them like that?" I let him talk himself in circles about how hard things were for everyone. Then I said, "Mark, you're their actual father. This is your chance to step up and help your own kids." He started saying he couldn't just come up with that kind of money. Things were tight for him too. I said, "So you're telling me you can't help financially, but you're upset that I'm not doing it alone anymore while being disrespected. Is that right?" He didn't have much to say after that. About 6 weeks after I moved out, Laura asked to meet for coffee. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "When you left, I thought you were just angry," she said. "I thought you'd cool off and come back," I told her. I had cooled off, and that's exactly why I wasn't coming back. She stared at her coffee cup. "The house is drowning me. I'm working overtime, and it's still not enough. The kids help a little now, but they're shocked by how expensive everything is." Lily actually said to me last week, "How did Jay afford all this?" Like she's just now realizing you were carrying all of us. I didn't say anything. She continued, "Jake got a full-time job. Lily's working 30 hours a week now. They're both paying me rent finally. But it's still not enough. I think we're going to have to sell." I nodded. That might be the smartest move. She looked up at me with something like desperation. "Can't you just help us? One more time? We could refinance in both our names. You could co-sign." I cut her off gently. "Laura, no. I gave you 11 years. I gave you $500,000. I gave you every ounce of effort I had. And your kids looked me in the eye and told me I was nobody. I'm not doing it again. You need to sell the house, downsize, and live within your actual means. That's not punishment. That's reality." She started crying then, not loud, just quiet tears. They didn't know what they were saying. I said, "They're adults. They knew exactly what they were saying. They just didn't know it would have consequences." The house went on the market about 3 weeks later. I know because my realtor app showed it to me like a cruel algorithm. They listed it too high at first, then dropped the price twice. It took almost 3 months to sell. The market wasn't great, and they were behind on payments, which made buyers nervous. When it finally closed, Laura texted me the sale price. After paying off the mortgage, the realtor fees, and the closing costs, there wasn't much left. Her share was enough for a deposit on a small rental. The kids had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment with her because they couldn't afford their own places yet. Jake ended up on the couch for the first 6 months. Real life hit them like a freight train. About 4 months after the sale, I got an email from Lily. The subject line was, "I don't know if you'll even read this." I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. She wrote a lot. Some of it was angry, accusations about abandonment and how I walked away when things got hard. But buried in the middle was this: "I said you weren't our dad because I knew it would hurt you. I wanted a reaction. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I thought you'd just take it like always. I didn't realize how much you were doing until it stopped. The new apartment is tiny. Mom cries sometimes when she thinks we can't hear. Jake and I both work now and we still barely have money. I understand now what you were paying for. I don't know if I'm apologizing or just venting, but I want you to know I get it now. You weren't just some guy. You were the guy who showed up. And I threw that away because I was scared you'd leave eventually anyway. So I pushed first." I sat with that email for 3 days before responding. I wrote back, "I appreciate you writing this. I always cared. I also care about myself now, which I neglected for years. I'm not closing the door on a relationship in the future, but I'm also not stepping back into the role I had before. If you want to talk as adults, not as a kid yelling and me absorbing, I'm open to that. But respect is the baseline, not the reward." She wrote back 2 weeks later. "We've had coffee twice since then. It's awkward and careful, and nothing like it was, but it's something. Jake hasn't reached out except for one drunk text at 3 a.m. that said, 'You really screwed us all over.' I didn't respond. My life now is smaller and quieter. I work, I go to the gym, and I cook for myself. I started dating again. which feels strange after 11 years. I met Rachel 8 months after the divorce was finalized. She's a school counselor, never been married, no kids. When I told her my story on our third date, I was terrified she'd run. Instead, she said, "You spent 11 years being a father to kids who didn't want one, and a husband to a woman who wanted your wallet more than your partnership. I'm glad you finally left." We've been together a year now. She doesn't have baggage about my past or expectations that I'll fund a lifestyle I'm not living. We split everything 50-50. We communicate. It's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. Do I miss anything about my old life? Sometimes. I miss the version of those kids I thought I was raising. The ones I imagined would grow up and realize what I'd done for them. But that was fantasy. The reality is they didn't want a stepdad. They wanted a checkbook with legs. And when I finally stopped being that, they learned what their choices actually cost. The house sold for $200,000 less than I'd bought it for after the market adjustment, the rushed sale, and the unpaid bills that piled up. Laura and the kids moved into a cramped apartment in a worse school district. Jake and Lily both work jobs they hate to pay rent they resent. Mark, the devoted dad, suddenly stopped being available for weekend visits when his kids needed money instead of entertainment. Here's what I learned, and I'm going to be really honest about this. Love doesn't obligate you to fund your own disrespect. Being generous doesn't make you noble if you're just teaching people that you'll accept being treated like nothing. They told me they didn't have to respect me. They told me I was just some guy who pays bills. So I believed them. I took them at their word. And when the money stopped, the house of cards collapsed. That's not revenge. That's just cause and effect. They wanted a life without me in it. I gave them exactly that. No me. No money. Just the bills I'd been covering while being told I didn't matter. So here's my question for you. Was I wrong to walk away and let them face the reality of what their house actually costs without me? Should I have stayed and kept funding people who called me nobody? If you were in my position, what would you have done? Absorbed the disrespect and kept paying, or walked away as I did and let them learn the hard way? Drop your verdict in the comments, because I genuinely want to know if I'm the villain in this story or if I finally did what I should have done years ago. And if this story made you think, or if you've ever been the person funding everyone else's life while being told you don't matter, hit that like button and subscribe to Reddit Visuals. Your support helps us keep bringing you real stories that make you question everything. Thanks for watching.